So we once again asked for a reaction. We got a reaction, and Newcastle's romance with the Champions League just keeps on going. The instant match reaction to Athletic Bilbao is coming to Newcastle fans. So do us a favour and make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Black White Banter, ladies and gentlemen. And it's a very, very happy welcome back to Black White Banter. Because Newcastle United, after what has been a pretty awful couple of days, whilst we've all digested that disgusting performance down at West Ham, and I don't think any single Newcastle fan on the planet, including players, coaches, you name it, would have called it anything else, have bounced back with a win. And it's that bouncing back that is becoming a bit of a recurring theme from league to other competitions. But in the Champions League, there is no easy match, and I will die on the hill. I've sat and watched tonight Club Brugge flashing on the screen, drawn against Barcelona in a match that you'd expect Barcelona to win very comfortably, and that was 3-2, 3-all, 2-2, you name it. And that just hammers home to me how important it is that Newcastle just win football matches in this competition. But to do so with 10 goals scored and only 2 conceded against the best team, one of the best teams in the competition in Barcelona, you've got to be happy. And look at the league table. Yeah, I'm going to stick that right on the screen. Look at that. Very, very good company, and it's very early days, but we are giving ourselves a fantastic opportunity to go and qualify. That was my first thoughts after a result like that. But let's talk about the match. Look, Eddie Howe decided to make very few changes. I expected Kieran Trippier to come back in, and rightfully so. A lot of the midfield stayed the same. Barnes coming in on the right-hand side was a bit of a shock. But look, is Eddie Howe thinking about Brentford with a lot of players not coming in that we maybe expected to? The likes of Jacob Murphy, who, you know, we'll touch on him. He did get on the pitch earlier than expected. Is he thinking about Brentford? I'd be shocked if he's not, because that's how important a Premier League match before the last international break of the season, of the year, calendar year, sorry. That's how important Brentford feels. We need wins in the Premier League and ASAP. So the team, I wasn't shocked. I was a little bit on the fence about Joelinton being in, just because of confidence, because of his role in the side, and I'll keep asking questions on that. But look, big night under the light at St James's Park. I obviously wasn't there tonight, so I can't comment on the changes to local hero in the build-up to the game. I've done a video on my other channels. If you're new around here, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, give us a little like you Lou. It goes a very long way. It helps this video go to more eyes in the aftermath of the game, more than you might think. And subscribing at Black White Banter across all socials, where you would see that video where I talked about a bit of concern about a St James's Park tradition of recent years being changed. So the build-up, I wasn't able to partake in that. I hate not being particularly at home matches. But of course, I'm in sunny, glorious Brazil. So Newcastle's start to the game for me wasn't ideal. Really, really wasn't. I thought in the first 15 minutes in particular, really sloppy with the ball. And a big part of me was thinking, here we go again. It's West Ham all over again. We couldn't get any dominance on the ball. We couldn't string a lot of passes together. Anthony Gordon started very sloppily. Bruno started sloppily. Kieran Trippier was giving the ball away in areas. And we just couldn't get all of it. And I felt like Athletic Bilbao, experienced in this competition and in European football in general in recent years, they seeked a little bit of blood. They could smell a nervousness, if that's what it was, on the back of that West Ham game. It was never going to be a confident Newcastle performance early doors. I would have been shocked. That's just a human instinct. Never mind just in football, anything, when you've been bashed like what they know they have in the aftermath of West Ham, it was never going to be all guns blazing. So Bilbao really, really took the game to us early doors. Couple of half chances where they didn't make the right pass, and Newcastle escaped in a sense. And I do take that loosely. But then we started to get a bit of a hold of the match. And as we were starting to get more into the game, of course, Dan Burn, and I tell you what, and I don't like to make big statements, anyone who follows my channel knows that, you will not see a better header of the ball in any competition this season. I would argue that was better than the Carabao Cup final goal. Because if you see where he's taken the header from for it to swerve, it was incredible. Incredible. It was nice to see a set piece come off in the build-up to it as well, because we've got a set piece coach. I've questioned so far this season what he's being paid to do. So Dan Burn running off his man, almost being a spare player at the back. Why the tallest man on the pitch, second tallest man on the pitch, is he? Is he Voldemort, Dan Burn? Regardless, why a tall man was there in so much space, I don't really care. Brilliant header, chuff for Dan Burn, and we always chuff to see the local lads get on the score sheet. And it had that Carabao Cup celebration, the way he ran off. Love it, absolutely love it. And again, very similar to the Tottenham match, I'm asking, can Newcastle go and push on? Go and push on now. Athletic Bilbao might drop a bit deeper. We've got the players on the pitch to do so. Let's go after it. We didn't really. And again, we'll touch on the overall issues in performance at the end of the match. That was a disappointment for me in the first half because everything was there. All the minerals were there to go on and really, really get into Bilbao going 1-0 up. And Bilbao grew a little bit in the match, but weirdly, Newcastle had chances. You know, Joelinton offside. Great work in the build-up to put that away. Very much like a centre-forward. Imagine that, Joelinton being a centre-forward. Barnes had a chance at the near post when he tried to flick it in. Voltemar, a great headed opportunity for him. And I thought our best player in the first half, in my opinion, was coming through Joelinton, getting between the lines. And I'm chuffed that I can say that because Joelinton has come under so much criticism. But Bilbao were not getting to grips with that central midfielder in Joelinton supporting Voltemar. And we know that's what Joelinton's role is starting to become. And that's why I still ask question marks whether he is the man from midfield who can support the forward and really link midfield to front three. I'm still not going to sit here and say I'm fully convinced because of one match against Bilbao. I'm not. He needs to, if he's going to stay on this side, he needs to go and do it at against Brentford on Sunday. So that one, the jury's out. But in the first half, Joelinton, when Bruno looked like a player who'd been ill, he was not having his best day by any means, but Sandro Tonali was doing Sandro Tonali things. Joelinton was getting so much luck in between the lines. He really, really was. And obviously the one where he missed an open goal, luckily he handballed it so we can move on from that. He did have a bit of a brain fart when it came back to him, it looked like, but it would have been handball, let's be totally honest with you. Let's be totally honest with ourselves on that one. But regardless, a lot of our good work in the first half was coming from Kieran Trippier and Barnes down the right, which was nice to see. Anthony Gordon goes off. He didn't look right from the first whistle. We hearing that Eddie Howe spoke to Anthony Gordon in the build-up of this match about what's wrong with him, what he needs to do more of, whatever. That's what Craig Hope's reporting anyway. He didn't start well at all. He gave the ball away in the first half where Nick Pope saved at his near post. He was running into corners, running into cul-de-sacs of players without really making the right decision. I don't know. Something is still not right with him. He loves playing in the Champions League this season, which he's proved with his output, but not tonight. And he went off and he didn't look right. So I hope that's not serious because that's a player down regardless of how he's performed. But Jacob Murphy comes in. I'm delighted about it. And he put a foothold on the game straight away. Some decent balls into the box. And you know what you get with Jacob Murphy? You're getting a reliable player who knows this Eddie Howe system inside out. So we take that lead into half-time. We're like, look, that's great in the Champions League. And I'll keep going back to the point that winning in any football match in the Champions League is very, very good. So we've got something to build on there. So many options off the bench, which again is that luxury that we will have to eventually get used to. But as a fan, I'm still not. And we just started the second half so much better. Eddie Howe decided to stick rather than twist, which surprised me a little bit. But obviously Jacob Murphy had been forced into action sooner than expected. And we were better in the second half. And the timing of the goal, very similar to that Tottenham Cup match just a week ago, was perfect. And it was a sucker punch for Bilbao. Because in the first half, they'd been on the verges. You know, they hit the post from a screamer. Nick Pope had been called into action. So they were threatening a lot. And you could maybe argue in an attacking sense that Bilbao were maybe better value for a goal or two in that first half. That one would probably be a little bit up for debate. But second half, for Joelinton to get that header, look, I'm delighted for him. Lovely cross from Barnes, and that just settled us down massively. It settles the crowd down, even though I wasn't part of it tonight, and everyone just takes a breath because a 2-0 lead at home in the Champions League in a place like St James's Park with our defence and goalkeeper, it's a solid one to have, and it was a sucker punch for them. And naturally, Bilbao then dropped a little bit because we didn't take the foot off the gas, which I was delighted about. We kept on pushing. We had so much more of the ball. We were better with the ball. We were picking up good areas. And what I saw was an Athletic Bilbao team who couldn't cope with running off the ball. They were starting to tire. Barnes was always on the last man. Jacob Murphy, who came on, he was always willing to run. Kieran Trippier was bombing up and down that side. Dan Burn, has anyone ever seen Dan Burn have so much attacking freedom in the second half? He should have done better when he flashed it past the post. Like, Eddie Howe gave him a lot of freedom to get forward, and that'll take some teams totally off guard, because I'm sure when Bilbao have studied up on Newcastle, they're like, right, Dan Burn is not a natural left-back. He's going to sit back, and he's probably going to invert in as a centre-back at every opportunity. And Dan Burn, fair play to the bloke, he was getting forward at every opportunity and giving us another option there, which is not a statement I say very often. And Newcastle were much better, but then Eddie Howe made changes. Bruno, not his night at all. That's totally fine. Eddie Howe clearly thinks that Bruno is that important, naturally, that he brought him in despite being ill for a couple of days and not training yesterday. He comes off. that'll never be a Bruno performance anyone writes home about. That's fine. Barnes goes off, Elanga comes on, you're thinking, right, everyone is thinking, right, Elanga, this is a match made for you. It worries me that Eddie Howe's not thinking of him first, with Jacob Murphy looking like Eddie Howe wanted to rest him in the first half when Gordon gets a knock, but that's by the by. Elanga comes onto the pitch, Ramsey ends up coming onto the pitch, Miley comes onto the pitch, which I'm always happy about because he's going to have a very specific role and he's going to bring a bit of energy in that midfield. I like him a lot more than some Newcastle fans do, but I just felt like Newcastle dropped off in the second half after that Joelinton goal. The substitutes seemed to change us a little bit. We were much better in the second half, and I will reiterate that, but we looked a little bit all over, figuring out positions. Then Voltemada goes off for the last 15 minutes, and that's where we lost an outlet. We lost an ability to link up but slow down the match and he brings people into play like we know that's probably his biggest strong point. We lost that, and Elanga playing through the middle, it's not his natural position anyway, but again, Elanga's getting very little joy. But don't get me wrong, Newcastle kept on knocking on the door. Elanga's got the chance at the back post that he's got to do better with, but Athletic Bilbao grew into the game, and that was a bit of a disappointment for me towards the end of the second half. We had fresher legs to bring on than them. They already had their injury issues coming up the Tyneside. And they had chances. And Nick Pope, say what you want about him, the Ramsdale-Pope debate will go on. He saved us when called upon. You've got to make the saves. I'm not saying any of them were amazing by any means. He got a good hand in the first half from a long distance shot. He tipped a couple past the post in the second half. He caught the ball, which was very, very nice to see in the second half on a lot of opportunities to slow the match down. And he was. And Bilbao were growing into the game. In the last 10 minutes, as injury time approached, it was just about getting over the line. They were picking up pockets of space. And if it was just at 1-0, I would have been crapping my knickers. And even if they pulled one back, it would have been a nervy end to the match. But we didn't really get going after the substitutes were made. We just started that second half a lot better. Man of the match performances for me tonight, standout performance, should I say. Kieran Trippier, I'm going to start with. We all want to see Livramento back in the team. Hall, great to see him back on the pitch tonight. He looked like he had a lot of energy. But if there's one thing I'd love some of them fullbacks to learn, Kieran Trippier, in this Newcastle side, particularly Livramento, who will probably be playing on the right not too shortly, is how he supports the attack. I thought Kieran Trippier was brilliant tonight. Him and Barnes, who haven't got the best relationship in terms of the amount of minutes they've played together, he was linking up with him great. He was getting forward at every opportunity, taking control. We know what leadership he brings, and Kieran Trippier, for me, goes a little bit under the radar sometimes, even when he looks a little bit leggy or up against a faster player, in how good he can be in this Newcastle side. Fair play to him. I thought Sandro Tonali looked much more like Sandro Tonali. Why it's not away from home more, the likes of him, Bruno and Joelinton, is something that needs to be worked on, but we'll touch on the upcoming Premier League game in a second. I thought Tonali was very important on a night that Bruno didn't really offer as much next to him. Dan Burn gets an honourable shout-out for me, not just for that incredible header, but his all-round performance, the way he got forward, the way he had a bit of freedom. Fair play to him. I thought Jacob Murphy had an impact coming on the pitch. And Joelinton, I'm going to give a special mention to Joelinton because it is clear in this Newcastle side what his role is. I've already touched on it. It is to support the forwards, give Nick Voltemada help with his aggression, his power, his height, his strength. But it's that link between the thing. I don't think Joelinton tonight played amazing. I still think he's a little bit heavy in his touch. He's heavy in his passing. But he did get in some good positions, and it was a great confidence boost. Am I convinced that he is the man to support our front three from midfield whilst Bruno and Tonali do what they do so well in this side? I'm not sure. With the Ramsey breathing down his neck, who still needs more minutes, I'm not sure. But Joelinton, in a week when I've been surrounded by Brazilians telling me that he's not very good and he's just been dropped from the Brazil squad, and I'm sure that one will really hurt. What a way to come back to that, and all of the talk, me included, from the West Ham match where he's not the current answer, then set up loads of chances for himself, will I just add, and have a beautiful header and celebrate with his supporters at the Gallagher end. Job is a good one. So Joelinton gets probably a special mention from me on that one. Not so good things tonight. Certainly our control of the match. Negative performances, I don't really want to say too much. Anthony Gordon, we can talk about him, but he looked like he picked up a knock early. But he certainly didn't look right early doors. Anthony Elanga did not have the impact again against a team where the other wingers were having a lot of joy when he came onto the pitch. He was on the left, which was interesting, but no, still not enough for me. And Voltemada, I thought was really good. I'm not going to mention him on the negative side. He linked up well. He was aggressive. The Bilbao players didn't know how to handle him. That's going to continue happening. But no, on the negative side, not too much to write home about. I'm not going to, I think Bruno, but again, I'm going to give him that pass because he's very good at St James's Park in this competition because he's been ill. And he was coughing at the end. I watched the footage as he was walking off the pitch. Now, on the performance as a whole, what I'm leaving saying in isolation, that's a good win of the competition it's in. 3 matches in a row in the Champions League to be sitting where we are in the table is nothing short of fantastic. And you cannot say any other. Performances aside, whatever, we are giving ourselves a fantastic opportunity to go through to knockout football. Now, in terms of the season as a whole, it was the reaction we wanted in terms of the better performance. But I've once again come away, which sums up our season from St James's Park, thinking, well, we were good, we weren't great, but weirdly we could have scored a lot more goals. That, for me, is the statement that I've been making all along this season. I made it after the Tottenham match. I made it after the Fulham match. I've made it after, Wolves when we won 1-0 in the Premier League at St James's. There are a lot of games where that is what I've said. And why do I think that is? It's because I think Newcastle are going through a stage of identity in the attack. Confusion. Defence, not one Newcastle fan should be worried. Malik Chow, Sven Botman, Dan Burn playing pretty well. Kieran Trippier, Livramento to come back in. Fabian Schär not even getting on the pitch, and when he last played, he scored. That's not a worry. We are safe as houses there. We've got some top talent. It's in the attack where I don't think Newcastle are stomping their authority on matches. And I think we look every bit like a team in attack where I'm asking, what is Eddie Howe telling them here? What is Eddie Howe trying to achieve here? And what sort of style of play are we trying to... And that falls under Joelinton being it between the lines. So many teams have played between the lines against us. We did it to another team tonight, and Joelinton had a lot of success, but in the Premier League, he's not. It's all about Brentford on Sunday. Can we play well in the Premier League? He's rested the likes of Murphy when he wanted to. There's legs on the bench there that have not played many minutes tonight. I hope Anthony Gordon's injury is not serious, but this league form needs to be pulled round ASAP before we go on the break. And then we've got Man City. Then we've got Marseille. There are lots of big matches coming up, so take the international break for everything it is. But first, there is a big job in a difficult away London match at Brentford, as Liverpool would testify to more recently. And we need to figure out that attacking identity sooner rather than later. Is that going to happen in 3 days? I'm not sure, but we need to play a hell of a lot better than what we did against West Ham. Athletic Bilbao, tick. Champions League and Newcastle United together in a romance, in a relationship so far this season, tick. But it's all about, you're only as good as your next match. Forget about your last one, your next match. So let's see whether the levels can be raised again, because tonight was mixed, but we got the job done. Brentford is massive. Newcastle fans, if you've stuck around this long, I wasn't at St James's. I'm currently in Brazil, asking every single Tom, Dick and Harry what they think of Bruno and Joelinton. Bruno they seem to be keen on. Joelinton not so much, but my God, did he shut them up tonight, which was nice. I'm going to be back. I'm not going to be back for the Brentford match neither. It'll be after the international break, but I'm meeting Tsunami Argentina in Buenos Aires for the Brentford game. They're going to take me under their wing, which will be incredible, and I'll try and document it all on here. So whack that like, whack that subscribe. Sorry I've yabbeted for so long in my hotel room, but as always, Newcastle fans, it was a reaction again. We just need to stop asking for responses and get a bit of consistency in the Premier League. Athletic Bilbao, tick. Keep the faith. How are you, lads?